Alright, dickheads, I'm your chunky messiah, Ethan, and I'm just here with another one of them there tabletop tall tales videos. Again, I very nearly just said on that there PC. Managed to just about stop myself, but I very nearly said it. Yes, I'm here talking once again about Vampire, and no, I'm not going to be talking about the specific clans yet. That's coming, don't worry, I'm probably going to start that next week. But this time, I'm going to be doing two things. Essentially, I'm going to go over... Well, first of all, I'm going to go over a couple of characters that aren't really... Well, nope, that's the second thing I'm going to go over. First of all, I'm going to talk about the advice I mentioned that I was going to give in the last episode, but I just kind of didn't get around to it. Going to go over that real quick. And then we're going to be talking about Vampire the Masquerade again, but I'm going to be talking about a couple of characters that that I've played that I never... Well, no, that I enjoyed, but that I don't think are worth an entire video on their own. Like, really... Either not that much happened to them, or beyond the concept, there wasn't really much going on there. Some kind of throwaway characters that I've played over the years in various different situations. This is... Yeah, I do have other characters and other stories I could tell that aren't going to be mentioned here, such as there's a couple of stories from my... Well, there's one story, really, from me playing my Nosferatu from Somerset, which is a terrible accent, I'm aware, but I think I've mentioned my opinion on character voices, but yeah, I've got a story or two from him. I've already got some stories about my my Cockney punk Nosferatu, Albert. However, both of those are kind of too much in the recent past. I've actually got another one about alternate Mastiff, like Mastiff in New Orleans, that I could bring up, but as I said, those are like too recent for me, and I don't think anyone from my who I play my games with watches these, but I know that at least a couple of them are aware that I make videos like this. So if suddenly, like, you know, one turned up with talking about it, I don't want to say anything that might be inaccurate to the games. I just feel like there should be some distance between any given campaign and me telling the story about it. Anyway, let's go for this advice first. Straight up, right off the bat, this advice. This advice is essentially 2 points. One is going to be about dice. The other, the one that's actually relevant to Vampire, is going to be an answer to a question someone posed a few days ago. And by a few days ago, I mean it was actually about a week ago now, I think, on my channel's Discord regarding running tabletop games. I've become increasingly aware from the comments, both on these videos and on the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines videos, that there's a lot of you who either haven't played tabletop games before, or don't have much experience with it, and are kind of more interested in getting into tabletop games. As for, you know, where you could go to, you know, get involved in this stuff, can't help you. It changes a lot depending on where you are. I'm not gonna lie, the way I got into tabletop role-playing in the first place was kind of bloody peculiar, because I literally used this channel to do it. I genuinely put out a call asking for people who watched the channel who might be interested in being involved in a tabletop game, including a DM. I happened to meet a friend of mine who's been on the channel before, Typing Key. I met him through that, and he ran what it remains one of my favourite campaigns I've ever played, was a Shadowrun campaign. That was kind of the way I got into it properly. I did do a bit of, you know, role-playing with tabletop games before that, but that was really kind of the big way I got into it. You know, just kind of, I don't know, look in your local area, see if there's any, like, game stores or anything nearby that run stuff, and failing that, you know, the internet's always an option. There are definitely places online. I don't know if, fuck me, I can't actually remember the name of the bloody system. Is it Roll20? I think it's Roll20, I'm not sure. But there are, you know, there's that one website, that famous one that literally hosts games, that I think you might be able to find games on there. There's ways to do it. I'm not great for advice for that, sorry. However, the question that I was asked, that I was supposed to be answering, and I did answer this guy in the Discord, but I'm saying it again here. If you've not run a game before and you're interested in running a game, like say you and some of your friends, none of you have ever played tabletop RPGs before, you want to give it a go, and you're the one who's going to run it. This guy asked, basically, he said he wanted to run Vampire the Masquerade as his first RPG. His first tabletop RPG that he's ever run. And he asked for any advice. And the only advice I can give someone who's considering, if you're considering, you know, running Vampire the Masquerade and you're not particularly experienced in running games, there's one very big piece of advice I can give you, and that piece of advice is Jesus Christ, don't. Vampire the Masquerade is an awful game. I'd argue, actually, that most World of Darkness games are awful games to run as your very first game. And I'll tell you for why. Honestly, the system that you should be running if you want to run your very first, if you want to DM your first game, is Dungeons and Dragons. Is D&D 5th edition. For the simple reason that D&D 5th, you know, D&D, not just D&D 5th, but D&D in general, but currently D&D 5th, you can get away with railroading. You don't need a particularly complicated plot. You don't need particularly complicated NPCs. It's got a fairly solid, rigid structure. You know, that kind of quest structure that everyone, even if you haven't played D&D, you more or less know what's going on. You know, you get your information, you go to the next town, you do your quest, you hand it in, you get another quest, you do that. You know, it's got that rigid format. Whereas Vampire the Masquerade is a living nightmare because obviously there's a lot of different styles of tabletop RPG, but Vampire the Masquerade very heavily leans towards the sandbox style of an RPG setting, in that while at the early stages of a campaign, because there is actually kind of a built-in function system to the way that, you know, a Vampire the Masquerade game starts in a kind of semi-rigid formula, which is essentially your coterie is formed, which is the in-universe explanation for your party, is formed, you get summoned to some dude who's your handler, and your handler tells you to go talk to the Primogen, and the Primogen will give you quests. And that is the starting structure of every Vampire the Masquerade game. The problem is that in almost every single case, either after you've done your quests for the Primogen and handed them in, or while attempting to do your quests for the Primogen to hand them in, you will run into other plot threads and you will start getting embroiled in the politics. Or the party will start getting embroiled in the politics. Which is fine for an experienced GM who understands that what they're getting into is this inherently political sandbox situation. But if you aren't prepared for that as a GM, you're going to find yourself frustrated and you're going to have a great deal of difficulty because suddenly players are going to want to veer wildly off course because the political machinations of any given city is kind of what the game is built for, at least in my opinion. It's a very social game. It's all about deception and trickery and manipulation and, you know, solving things through kind of wheeling and dealing rather than outright combat. That's not to say that you can't make a vampire game that's mostly combat. In fact, one of the characters I'm going to talk about in a bit was in a game that was almost entirely combat. But, although it was not almost entirely combat, but was a lot more traditional D&D style, for reasons I'll get into. But this, you know, it's not geared towards that. You can kind of tell based on Vampire's combat system being incredibly quick, very simple, and very lethal. You know, there's a solid chance in Vampire the Masquerade that basically whoever... kind of like a Wild West duel, you know. Whoever draws first is the one who kills. You know what I mean? Like, even if you're fighting someone a lot. Let me put it this way: Mastiff, he is not statted for combat. He just isn't. He never has been. He is a charisma character. However, he always had 2 sawn-off shotguns. Not hard to get. He killed almost everyone he fought, because he drew first. Because that's just kind of how weird that system is. Like, if 2 characters who are statted heavily into combat interact with each other, sure, that might function a bit more like a D&D fight where they're kind of going back and forth. But almost all vampires, it's going to be like, oh shit, click, boom, done. Like, you know, the combat isn't the point. The point is twisting the rules, and yeah, it's this big political sandbox, and these campaigns always have a lot of moving parts. They're complicated, and they're awkward. So don't start with Vampire the Masquerade. If you're trying to first get into a game, honestly, go into a kind of combat-focused game with that kind of quest system. I'd almost say even consider Shadowrun, if you just don't want to do the D&D stuff. But Shadowrun can be a bit complicated. Like, good God, like my Shadowrun 5th edition book is like thick and like thin pages and small text and like not much fluff. Like, there's a lot of systems in there, but like just something like that. Even like the D100 systems of like the Fantasy Flight, I think it was Fantasy Flight 40k games, or the Warhammer Fantasy game, or even if you just, like, I've got Adventures for Middle Earth. I've got like the Player's Handbook of Adventures in Middle Earth over there. Just do something like that that's got this kind of more strict path. Where, yeah, you can deviate from the path, but even if you deviate from the path, ultimately it's very easy to essentially turn that deviation into either another path or a detour onto the path, whereas Vampire the Masquerade is very much a sandbox that's reliant on kind of player-driven stuff. Do not start with Vampire the Masquerade. It's fine to start playing tabletop games, like, as a player with Vampire the Masquerade, but don't try and start running games of Vampire the Masquerade. Like, I've run several campaigns in my life, and I have a lot of... I can't handle Vampire the Masquerade. Like, it overwhelms me. And granted, that part of that's just because I'm not a great GM. I admit this. I'm bad at it. I'm not great at planning, basically. And when I do plan, I'm not great at sticking to the plans, because, like, something cool will come into my head, so I want to go do the cool thing, which will fuck up all what little planning I've done, because I decided to go do something else cool, and shit, I've got 7 more hours to kill. Of shit I need to make up, you know what I mean? Don't start with Vampire, as a GM. Don't. It's a bad plan. Start with D&D. The other thing is, in regards to dice, it's less advice, it's more just a suggestion. If you are going to start playing tabletop games around a table, you know, like, and you don't have any dice, just fucking buy the ones. Just buy, like, a set of polyhedral dice that costs, like, a quid. Like, you can get... I own a lot of dice. Like, I recently actually bought this cup. This is the second dice cup I own. I own one that's literally downstairs in my bag that I take with me to Vampire. And it's just full of D10s, and it's got a little flap on the top where I've got a full metal polyhedral set, just in case. But I got this, which is from Q Workshop, which is a company that makes a lot of very nice dice sets, and apparently other dice paraphernalia. Because I literally bought 4 sets of Q Workshop's... I think they're quite nice. Outer Gods, I think they were called? Dice sets? You know, they kind of call a Cthulhu... Call Cthulhu dice sets. I've got Cthulhu... I'm trying to get the things. I've got Cthulhu, Hasta the Unspeakable, Nyarlathotep, and Azathoth. They're all, if I do say so myself... I'm not sure if you'll be... I'm trying to get this in a way that I can show you. Hang on. Behave. I don't want to drop one of you. There you go. There you go. Lovely little dice sets. Yeah, like, Q Workshop's good if you want to get, like, your slightly fancier dice. But honestly, you can go on like eBay or Amazon and just buy like an entire bag full of like issue because this dice cup, this leather dice cup, cost me about 17 quid, I think, and yeah, each one of the sets in here cost me at least a tenner, and there's 4 sets in here, so this is like 60 quid worth of dice and dice paraphernalia right there. But if I reach in here, if you ignore the bag, which is like the smaller bag which is like this big bag that my copy of the Devil's Carnival 2 Alleluia, I believe, came in. In here, I've got a big ugly blue bag full of generic dice. That's like 7 sets of generic polyhedral dice that cost me a tenner. Like, you can get cheap dice in like bulk, so just pick that up, honestly. Like, that's the best way to get dice. But if you do want to get like nice dice, either go online and look for some metal dice and get some nice metal dice, or if you want to just get some kind of pretty themed dice, Q Workshop do good stuff, and they tend to be around, you know, tenner price range, at least in the UK, 10 to 15. Some you do get some that are a bit more expensive, but most of them are 10 to 15. Okay. That's my advice. Just, you can easily buy cheap dice. If you're not sure if you're going to like it, folks, get, like, I know, a bag of shitloads of things of cheap dice for a tenner. Don't, like, invest in nice dice. Wait until you know you like tabletop games. Like, I don't actually play that many tabletop games, but because of the tabletop games I have played, I've developed a fixation on dice. Like, I collect dice, and I also just collect systems. I recently picked up... Yeah, I've got the Player's Handbook over there. I've got the Law Masters, so the DMG, essentially, for Adventures in Middle-earth. I don't think I'm ever going to fucking play Adventures in Middle-earth. Like, I can't imagine who I'm going to get to play Adventures in Middle-earth with me. But, like, I like the books, so, yeah. But, yeah, get cheap dice until you know you like it. Then if you like it, start buying like I do. Spend a lot of your money on dice and books you're almost never going to use, just because you like them. Okay. On to these characters. I've waffled about just tabletop stuff for a bit there. Let's talk about these characters. Now, I've got 2 planned, essentially. They're both from Vampire, although arguably one isn't actually from Vampire the Masquerade. One is from Vampire the Dark Ages, which is more or less the same system with slightly different lore. Some of the, you know, there's some clans that don't exist in Vampire the Masquerade anymore that are playable. There's certain changes in disciplines. including actually just the effects of disciplines and some difference in character creation. Like in Dark Ages, your generic start, I think, is like 11th or 10th gen, not 13th, and the lowest gen you can be is better, so it doesn't stop at 8, it stops at like 6, I think, because obviously that's like the Middle Ages, you know what I mean, it's like medieval times, so everyone's a bit older, everything's a bit different, and it also predates the Camarilla and stuff, but it's more or less the same system, just with some slight variations. If I can think of an extra one to talk about, I will, but I'm just going to talk about these two off the top of my head, because I don't think I really have... I have played other characters, but I don't think I have any particularly notable other vampires. So the first one I'm going to talk about is actually I believe the first vampire character I ever played. And I played this with my friend Type. This was actually a double bill. Because it was... Basically, it was a Malkavian. It was a pair of Malkavians. Because of course my first vampire character was a Malkavian. Because, you know, my favourite clan. Tied with a Shemise. Yeah, but I'm a big fan of Malkavians, and I didn't want to mess with the Shemise in my first game, so Malkavian. And it was a pair of characters, we both played them, and we really heavily invested in doing this stupid gimmick, and it was a stupid gimmick. But they were called Mr. Johnson and Dr. Jefferson, or Dr. Johnson and Mr. Jefferson, depending on which one of them you asked. And basically the notion behind them was that they were kind of an inversion of what Jeanette was, of Jeanette and Therese. Jeanette and Therese, 2 minds in one body. Johnson and Jefferson, 1 mind in 2 bodies. They were kind of a Tweedledee, Tweedledum situation, where they were, personality-wise, almost the exact same guy. In fact, they had the exact same personality. They routinely, you know, one would start a sentence, the other one would finish it, which was really hard to get right, and we fucked it up a lot when we tried to do dialogue scenes. We had to, like, just kind of quietly, because this was over Discord, we had to just kind of quietly, like, you know, tapping away to each other, before we'd actually say anything to make sure we were both on board on the decision we were making, if not necessarily the exact wording we were going to use. But yeah, the notion was they were a pair of dudes. They both wore, I believe, black suits with white shirts, black ties, little kind of fedoras. I think they wore sunglasses, you know, very kind of standard Men in Black kind of look. I played Johnson, Type played Jefferson, if I recall correctly, and Johnson, I think, was a short, hideous white guy, and Jefferson was a tall, attractive black man. But they both had the same accent, even though they were, you know, if you looked into who they were before they were turned into vampires, they came from completely different parts of America. They were both... I think Johnson was explicitly English, actually. But I think Johnson was English, Jefferson was American, but they spoke with the same accent, which was not relevant to where either of them came from. We never specified what the accent was, because Type's an American and I'm English, and neither of us really did accents. We just kind of delivered everything in a dull monotone. So they were all these same suits, and their stats kind of mirrored each other. Jefferson had very high appearance, and some manipulation, but no charisma. Johnson had very high charisma, but no appearance whatsoever, because he was hideous, and a couple of dots of manipulation. Jefferson, if I recall correctly, was very quick and strong, and he used a melee weapon, I believe. I think he fought with a sword. Johnson, however, used a sawn-off shotgun, and was quite dexterous and perceptive rather than being particularly strong. He just bang. I can't remember what their discipline split up was. I think one of them focused on Auspex and one of them focused on Dementation, if I recall correctly, and I can't remember which way round it was. They had a fair few dots in domain, they had a fair few dots in status, they had a fair few dots in resources. They also were not on the path of humanity. I don't really think I've touched on roads all that much, or the variant paths, because almost all vampires are on the path of humanity. Almost all of them. To the point at which, or at least in the Modern Knights, almost all of them are. In the Camarilla, it's incredibly rare to run into a vampire who isn't a humanity vampire. But humanity is just one of the various means by which vampires can essentially attempt to keep the beast at bay. Other philosophies can be adopted in order to kind of quell the beast, to keep it calm, to keep themselves sane. However, the other philosophies mean they're not basically acting as humans. The humanity is essentially acting on what I'd say is very generic human morality. You know, you don't steal, you don't murder people, you don't attack people for no reason, stuff like that. The paths arguably can offer you greater freedom in that many of the paths can allow you to murder people. But the problem is that a lot of the ones that allow you to murder people require you to murder people. Like, you know, they grant you freedom in some places, but force you to act your character out in a kind of strange and alien way. And actually justifiably, even if you're like, full of the... Like, functionally, it literally behaves the same as humanity. You just you just have a different, like, list of sins that you can and cannot commit. It's just a different list. And, like, technically, it reverses what your virtues are, which are kind of the things that determine the level of your humanity, but there's, like, 2 virtues that are, like, I think it's conscience versus instinct and self-control versus something else, and it just swaps from one to the other if you're going from the path, if you are on a path. Like, they tend to be different than the ones that you rely on humanity, but functionally, stat-wise, they're the same, because it's literally the same stat measures both, and the same stat measures your path. Weirdly, though, when you are on a path, it doesn't matter how many points you have on that path, you will always feel low humanity to everyone you interact with, because you have no humanity, so you always feel weird to them. I think the only people you don't feel weird to is other people on paths, and even then I think it might just be other people on your path. I think to everyone else you feel incredibly strange. Perhaps counterproductively, considering the fact that we were playing that. I don't know if Type had played Vampire before, but I don't think he had, and I'd never played Vampire before. Despite that, we decided to play a fucking Path Vampire. On top of this absurd gimmick we were running, we were playing a Path Vampire, and I think we were on... I think it was the Path of Power and the Inner Voice we were on, which is... I think it was that one, which is more or less amass power at any cost, essentially. Like, become a ruler, more or less. Not ruling, that's like the Path of Kings, but gain power, which led them to be duplicitous, and no one trusted them, and it was weird. They didn't really get very far, those two. Beyond... Yeah, we went through a kind of a mini campaign with them, like, we got about 5 sessions in, but... the structure of that campaign didn't lend itself. It was very rigid. It felt very much like almost like a D&D campaign. It felt odd how regimented we were and how stuck we were to certain quests. So we couldn't really, despite efforts to kind of wrench ourselves off of the plot railroad and go do the political stuff these characters were built for, we couldn't really do it. And also there were a couple of instances where, in hindsight, I realised the guy running the game pulled serious GM bullshit by just kind of magicking an immunity to bullets into characters that shouldn't have had it. Like, there was one really low-level gangrel, I think it was a gangrel, that the GM was very fond of, who just kept surviving, getting shot in the head repeatedly. But he didn't have fortitude and didn't have much stat. Like, there was no explanation. He just did, and it was clearly just because the GM liked that NPC and had plans for him. So he just didn't deal with the fact that we would like sneak up behind him and shoot him in the head, and he'd just be like, "Haha, whatever," and then run away. Which is infuriating when that happens. And I don't care how much you've planned your thing. If you allow the party to get into a position where they've managed to successfully sneak up on the villain and one-shot him in the back of the head, just deal with the fact that your villain's dead. Like, fuck. Like, if you put it down to a roll, just accept the fact that your villain's dead. Because otherwise it feels cheap. And it did then. And it feels more so now that I know there's no explanation for how he was able to just soak all of this, like, ludicrous levels of damage that would have just destroyed him immediately. Or at least, like, knocked him out. Stupid. But yeah. The weird character concept. I would never want to do that again. Actually, this does remind me of another character concept I had. Not that I had, but the party I'm playing with right now had, which... Good God, it could only last one session. Would be quite funny. I'll add this and then I'll tell you about the Dark Ages guy. That was Johnson and Jefferson, the Malkavians that were one mind and two bodies. Never really explained why. There is no... By the way, I do want to quickly point out that particular insanity is hot garbage and could never happen. Like, that's some magic bullshit. That's not insanity. That is magic horse shit. But, like, the GM was quite new, and all the players were very new to the setting. So we just kind of let it slide because it sounded fun. Even though, yeah, it makes no sense how that would happen. There's another concept. This obviously wasn't a character that we ever made. But honestly, I still, at one point, I think in between campaigns, I would like to do a one-shot of this. This sounds like a very fun idea to play, which is basically the idea of kind of an inside-out kind of situation. I think that's what that film was called, that Pixar movie with all the people in the little girl's head. Kind of like that, but for a vampire, where the party is essentially different, not necessarily full-on personalities, but different aspects of the player character who's a Malkavian, and that their insanity manifests as these separate internal kind of personalities that would fight for control and have to make rolls against each other to control certain actions. And I know that one was like courage, one was self-preservation. Was like the members of the party were like, oh, that'd be fun if I could play this. So if I could play courage, if I could play self-preservation, and we came to the conclusion that if we ever did that, I'd play the beast. Which would be very funny. Just like every now and again, not like frenzying, like a semi-intelligent beast. Just like every now and again, it's like, oh well, the beast won the roll. What do you want to do? I want to eat its guts. Shit like that. That'd just be fucking absurd, but very fun. Unplayable. That character would get themselves killed like that. Like, just basically, one bad roll where the beast ends up in charge, and that dude's gonna get himself killed. Do you know what I mean? Because he's not frenzying, but come on, if you're role-playing as the beast, you're gonna just, like, attack a dude for looking at you funny. And, like, then you're gonna get noticed, and you're gonna get shot, and you're gonna get killed, and the game's over. But that might be fun to try one day. See how it goes. Maybe don't play as the beast, but it could be fun. Okay, the other character I'm gonna talk about. This one's also gonna be a short one, I reckon, because I can't think of any other characters I've played. I think I might have actually been mining the bottom of all the fucking characters I've ever played in Vampire, honestly. I've not, like... Because these campaigns tend to just go on for quite a while. Or I've, like, played the same character multiple times in different campaigns. Yeah. But yeah, this other character I played. Was an interesting one. Can't remember his name, is the damnedest thing. I think it was Matthew Lapoa, I think was what his name was. Because he was in the Dark Ages, and he was a knight. He was an undead knight, a vampire who was around during the Battle of Hastings. I think he was actually a Saxon. Or was he a Norman? No, with a name like Lapoa, he must have been a Norman. I don't know why I even entertained the notion he was a Saxon. This was many years ago I played this guy. And it was the only time I played Vampire the Dark Ages. Like, I've been in situations where we've used aspects of the kind of slightly different system Vampire the Dark Ages uses, especially when we're playing older characters or genning characters who were around during that time period. We tend to go by those rules rather than modern Vampire rules for them specifically, but it's been a long time since I've actually played in the Dark Ages setting. I believe his name was Matthew Lapoa, which, fun little fact here for you, I'm sure many of you know this, but I used to do historical reenactment. I don't anymore. Basically hurt my leg and got sick of it. Like, simultaneously, I fucked my leg up and got sick of it, so I sold my armor, showed up a couple more times to play a priest, and then occasionally to man a cannon or be a comedy pirate, and then completely stopped. It's actually why I have, literally a quarterstaff next to my desk, and I don't know where my pirate saber is, my Jacobite saber. It's probably downstairs. But, yeah, I used to play a priest. But before I played a priest and a pirate, I played a Templar knight in full chainmail called Matthew Lapoa. Which was actually quite funny because for a while I was the second in command of my reenactment society, and my friend Edward played a character called Edward de Lacy. And amusingly, we didn't know this at the time. We both just kind of... Because I can't know why he picked de Lacy, but I know that I picked Lapoa because Lapoa was a name associated with a H.P. Lovecraft story. It was the rats in the walls, I think. I think the family, the old family of the character in there is the Lapoa family. But we actually found out sometime when I was the second in command of the Reenactment Society and kind of in character when I was wandering around in our like branch of the society, when I was the second in command of our branch of the society, I also played kind of his characters, like his knightly characters second. The kind of villainous foiled, his kind of good guy. And we actually found out that a Lapoa worked for a Delacy at one stage during, I think, ruling part of Ireland, which I thought was very amusing. But yeah, I took this name because he was a Norman knight and I needed one, and I think it was around the time. I think we were prepping for the Battle of Hastings or something like that at the time. So I was like, fuck it. He was at the battle. He died in the battle. He was turned at the Battle of Hastings, and he was a Norman knight. He was a city gangrel, which is an anti-tribu variant of gangrel. Can't for the life of me remember what the difference is. I know obviously they live in cities, but I can't remember what the mechanical difference is. I think they probably had a different discipline, like one discipline separate, and probably some, I don't know. Like, I cannot remember. It was so long ago. But this character always amused me, because this guy, as I say, was a knight. Matthew was a knight. And as such, I decided that it would, I'd lean into it, and I basically made him a combat build. Because going into this, we also knew that not only was this guy going to be a knight, we also knew that going into this game, it was going to be structured like a kind of a more of a standard D&D campaign. We were going to be traveling. It was just going to be like D&D, but vampires and at night, essentially, was kind of what the vibe was. So I played this guy, and I decided, you know what? I don't normally play heavy hitters. Which I don't. I still don't. I tend to play either magic users of some description, or I play kind of skill-based characters. In D&D, I would play a wizard or a rogue. Or maybe a bard. I don't tend to play the warrior or the barbarian. So I thought, you know what? Let's give it a go. I want to try playing this, especially since, I'm playing a knight. It makes sense, for him to be statted into combat, and because this is kind of built like a... This campaign's going to be built a bit D&D-ish. It's going to be a fair bit of combat, I imagine. So, I statted into that. So he had, like, the huge size merit. So he was massive, which by that thing, I think he was just, like, 6'11", which I say just. But, like, he wasn't, like, a living mountain. He was, like, 8 feet tall. But he was really big, especially when you consider how short people were during the Middle Ages. You may not know that, but yeah, historically, people were actually a lot smaller than we are now. Like, genuinely. It's why I think that's a basis for, like, why people thinking Napoleon was short is absurd. Because for the time, actually, he was above average height. It's just, there was, like, one bit of propaganda making fun of him that implied he was short. So that, combined with the fact that his height sounds small now, means that people think of him as short. He wasn't. Because, it was like, people were small during the Dark Ages, comparative to today. So this guy being like 6'11" made him like a giant compared to almost everyone else. He was an idiot as well. Like he had almost no intelligence. He had very little charisma. He was literally built like a brick shithouse. Like he had a lot of he had a lot of strength, a lot of stamina, and a bit of dex. Was what he had. And I think, if I recall correctly, I think he had potence. I think that was the, either that was because I spent some points to get him another discipline, or that might be the variant of the City Gangrel. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure he had, in fact, I'm certain he had potence, and he invested a fair few dots in potence over the course of this campaign. Huge dude. Friendly dude. I seem to recall he was also on a path, or on a road, which was actually a lot more common in Dark Ages, because this Dark Ages before the Camarilla, and really it was kind of the Camarilla enforcing or encouraging people to go on the path of humanity, which is one of the reasons why there's so few path vampires. So before that, roads were incredibly common, as they were called at the time. And I believe he was on the road of chivalry, because he was a knight. So he was a good guy, as well. He was this big, dumb, well-meaning guy, as much as he was. And if I recall correctly, he also had a very strange flaw. I'm a guy who really enjoys loading my characters up with weird flaws. I believe I've mentioned this before. Partially just for the systemic benefit it gets me. For the systemic? Nah, mechanical benefit it gets me. You know, if I load up a guy with flaws, that means I'm going to get a lot of freebie points to spend on stuff. So I like doing it for that reason. I also like it because it often offers interesting variables on the way they play. It's also another reason why actually in Vampire as well, I quite like merits as well, because they, rather than just being flat out stat add-ons, both merits and flaws add interesting kind of aspects and twists to the role-playing, because they add really strange, often, just, in a lot of cases, almost purely role-play-based variants onto the manner that you play your character. And one of the ones I gave him, which I don't know why I did, was, I can't remember what it was, I can't remember what it was called, but basically the land around him slowly froze. Like frost would just start kind of spread around him if he stayed in one place for too long, which caused problems for him when he was traveling, actually, because he had enough points in Protean where he could like meld with the earth. I seem to recall we made these characters with more points than you normally do at character creation, but because he had potence and a fair few dots in Protean, but he had a point in, I think it was Protean, where he could kind of meld with the earth. And that was how he slept, because they, obviously traveling cross-country in, like, medieval England, you're gonna get caught outside in the day. Everyone else hid under a blanket on this, like, on their cart. He was just like, ha-ha, peace out, and just sunk into the earth, and then rose back about the earth when night fell. Caused problems for him, though, because oftentimes the ground would freeze, which meant that he would sink down into the earth, and then, like, when everyone woke up the next night, they just kind of turned to the left, and there was just this weird frozen patch where all the plants were dead. And then, but it's like frozen, so we can't just like casually get up. So it's like, cool. And then it'll just be like, because he had all this fucking potency, so he'd fucking explode his way out. It was a dumb character. That mixed quite amusingly with one of the other characters. Actually, had two of his flaws actually mixed interestingly with this character, where one of us was playing a Crusader Knight Nosferatu, who I think he took inspiration from. I think there was like a movie about crusading that I've not seen, but has like a leper king character who I think might be based on an actual historical figure, who wore a gold mask in the film. This Nosferatu was based on that because he claimed he was a knight of, I think it's the Order of St. Lazarus, who were the kind of leprous Templar, the leprous Crusaders. I think it's the Order of St. Lazarus. I think so. I should know this. I'm pretty sure it's the Order of St. Lazarus. But he claimed he was one of those knights. And he wore kind of black armor with a black mask. He was also a Jew, which ran into my character's one of my character's flaws, because he had ethnic hatred Jews. He just fucking hated Jews. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to. I think I needed the points to buy my potence or something. So I was just like, fuck it, he hates Jews, whatever. I mean, it's the Middle Ages. Hating Jews really common in the Middle Ages. Fuck. I mean, let's be blunt here. Hating Jews was really common, basically update for most of history. Like the Jews had a bad time. Like everyone seemed to hate the Jews for an alarming amount of time for very little reason. So like, dunno, couldn't tell you. I don't hate Jews, so I don't know why people did. So, but yeah, this character hated Jews. Weirdly, I think he never found out that the Nosferatu was Jewish. I don't know how, which is odd, because he had like a very, almost like comically old-sounding Jewish name. But for some reason, I think I rolled it every now and again, when he would do something that would imply he was Jewish around Matthew. And I'd roll it, and because of how low his intelligence was, he just kept buggering it up, and he just never noticed. Like, he just never realised that he was travelling with a member of this ethnic group he despised, but he, like, presumably just didn't know enough about Jews to be able to actually identify, kind of a Hebrew name, or maybe the Hebrew language, or anything about the religion. Like, he just couldn't identify it, so he never noticed. But the weird... That flaw interacted oddly. The other flaw was, if I recall correctly, Matthew, as I said, he froze the ground around him. This guy was followed by cold wind. Wherever he went, there was this weird cold breeze, which led to this very absurd situation where, for one point, they were in a city. I think it was York, maybe. But they were in a city, and they were sleeping in, like, a barn, essentially. Like a disused stables. But the problem is, because they had this guy, because they had Matthew with his cold ground, and this Nosferatu with his cold wind, sleeping in the same barn every day. Essentially, over the course of this campaign that lasted about 4 sessions, when they opened this barn, snow. Like, it would freeze up entirely on the inside, and snow would start forming inside. It was, like, absurd, and they had to come up with increasingly outlandish explanations for why it kept happening. Yeah. This character... There were 2 other things about him, because as I said, not much happened with this guy, but there were 2 other fun things about him. One was that because of how high his strength was, because of how stupid he was, and because he had points in potence, the GM, and I thought this was quite funny, decided something about him, which was he doesn't know his own strength when doors are concerned. So every single time he had to open a door, locked or otherwise, he had to make a roll. Now, it wasn't a hard roll. It was a very easy roll to make, but he essentially had to make a roll to see if he didn't break the door. It was very easy to get the roll, but every now and again, he failed, which meant that he would regularly, if he's trying to open a door, he'll just like, kush! Ah, shit, just wrench it off its hinges and just be like, oh no, not again! If he's trying to push a door in, he'll just be like, kick it. Boof! Off the hinges. Like, routinely, we'd be trying to sneak, and then that'd be the time it fucks up, and he's just like, okay, guys, we gotta be quiet. Bang! And just the door goes off its hinges and flies across the fucking church or whatever that we're sneaking into and explodes into splinters across the room. We're like, I'm sorry, maybe they didn't notice that everyone fucking comes running because someone fucking destroyed the church doors. Very silly. The other point about him, the other entertaining point, was... As I said, he had Protean, which meant he had the first dot in Protean. And the first dot of Protean, if I recall correctly, is essentially what Beckett has. Where you can basically give yourself creepy glowing eyes. Glowing red eyes. That's not just an intimidation tactic, though I think it might give you bonuses to intimidation if you have it on when you use it. No, it's not just an intimidation tactic. It lets you see in the dark. Now, vampires, being nocturnal creatures... honestly, almost never comes up in Vampire the Masquerade. Normal, like in V20 and standard Vampire the Masquerade. Because they are creatures of the city. And there's a reason that every kind of campaign book is New York by night, LA by night, Milwaukee by night. City by night. London by night. Why the fuck did my brain go to Milwaukee by night? Watching too much Red Letter Media, good God. But yeah, every single one is in a city. Because they are beasts of the city. That's what they are. They are predators who live in the city. Which means that, even in the dead of night, the streets are lit. And you can more or less see where you are and what's going on. When you're indoors, got electric lights. Turn them on and off. It's fine. You can get flashlights, or torches, to use the English version. Flashlights for filthy Americans. Joking, of course. There's no end of ways to do it. You can even just buy night vision goggles. There's no end of things to... If you do run into a problem with the dark, you can fix it in no end of ways. How the hell vampires functioned prior to the invention of electric lights, I do not know. Because, my God, it had never occurred to me the level of difficulty vampires would have actually operating prior to electric light. Because, good God, they're terrified of fire. And unless you've got Protean, or like a Tremere who can just be like, whoa, I've got a fire in my hand, there's no way for you to light the area around you. There's no way for you to see where you're going, short of carrying a flame. Which means you're going to have to roll Rot Shrek all the damn time. Now, on the plus side, when you actually look at what Rot Shrek rolls are, they're actually quite easy. Because basically, up to the point, until you're burning, I think, basically, I think literally, there's like a list of what kind of fire constitutes what kind of roll. And I think it only gets to what is the otherwise standard, like if you don't know better, this is the standard thing you have to hit, of 7, that DC. It only gets to DC 7 when you're, like, burning. Like, the one before DC 7 is DC 5, and that's a huge roaring bonfire. So, like, a torch here, just like a literally a bit of wood with a fire over here. Yeah, maybe if you're even holding it out of your eyesight, You can just maybe feel the warmth. That, it's probably like a DC 3. But still a solid chance, because you're not rolling a many dice, because that's like self-control. And self-control is like, most of the time you're going to have like somewhere between 2 and 4 dice in self-control. 2 and 4 dots. With a maximum of 5. So it's actually entirely feasible for you to just fuck that up and just go at any given moment. And you're probably going to, every time you accidentally turn your head that way, you're going to be staring at a fire, so you're going to have to make that rot strike roll again. And honestly, a fire about that big on a stick, that far from your face, you can feel the warmth of. Yeah, if I was running the game, I'd say that's a 3, maybe a 4, just because of how close it is. My God. Like, it got to this absurd situation where this character, where my idiot City Gangrel Knight, who had almost no perception, just, you could snap your fingers in front of him, he wouldn't catch you. You know. You could literally smack your ass in front of him, and it would take him about half an hour. Like, literally, like, he had the awareness skills, like, the capacity for awareness, rivaling, or on par with that one Simpsons joke, where they're like, something said, where Homer's like, something said, not good. And then, like, by the time he's worked out something's happened, it's like 5 hours later, and everyone's gone home. Like, that's the level of awareness this dude had. But because he was the only motherfucker in the party who could actually see in the dark without carrying a flame, he was always the guy at the front who had to look for danger. But he couldn't do it, because while he could see in the dark, he was blind as a bat. And I do not know how vampires fucking functioned in a world before the invention of even, like, gas streetlight lamps. Just in a world where once you got out of your house that was maybe lit by little candles, past a certain hour, it was just dark. Like, I do not know how they functioned in that environment. Good God. Although, actually, having said that, I think vampires would just constantly be taking penalties. They wouldn't be blind, because, well, you know, even if you're in, like, open country at night, as long as it's not, like, massively cloudy, there's, like, moonlight, so you can kind of see where you're going. And I think that, I seem to remember reading somewhere that it was almost certainly easier to see at night in ye olde times, because there wasn't, you know, light pollution basically blocking out the stars and the moon, so you had more light to operate with, but still, you're taking penalties. Like, you had a much harder, like, vampires had a much harder time before the invention of lights, like electric lights. They had a much harder time. And, yeah, I haven't come up with another character. This one was a bit rambling, basically, because this one was more or less me just kind of tying up loose ends in terms of my actual characters. In Vampire, or at least the stories I'm comfortable sharing right now. I will eventually, at some point in the future, tell the stories of my Somerset, my friendly Somerset vampire, Nosferatu, and my punk Cockney Nosferatu. I will tell their stories eventually, but I want to, at the very least, get to the end of the campaign that I'm playing Albert in, before I tell the stories relating to those two. Also because that will give it probably just enough time for them to get fuzzy enough in my head that I can, like, not quite remember the details, and my characters come out looking a lot better than they would have if I could accurately remember what happened exactly. I do have more stories. I've got some from, you know, Dark Heresy and Shadowrun and stuff, that I will get into. However, I'm thinking, hopefully, next week. I still, by the way, don't have any idea what I'm going to do after Vampire. I'm thinking just cheating and going to Total War Warhammer. Even though no one cares. Just because, fuck it, that's something I'm familiar with. That I know some people said they want to watch it, so fuck it. I might just use it as excuses like, hi, I'm bad at playing the Beastman. Let's try playing the Beastman. You know what I mean? Just do something completely fucking irrelevant. I've been, like, paralyzed with indecision. And it's, like, made it impossible for me to record, because I've had a lot more views because of the hype around Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 than I've had in years. Like, so much more attention on the channel because of that. And I've been worried about basically trying to somehow capitalize on that still, but it's like, no, nothing I do. Short of just playing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines again, nothing is going to keep that going, so I just need to worry about just making content, I think, rather than worrying about that. I mean, I'm still going to be talking about Vampire. I'm going to do stuff about the clans. in the future. And I think, actually, looking at it, I didn't mean this to go on this long, but this has gone on for about 50 minutes. I think I'm going to set myself like a hard half-hour upper limit on the clan videos. But hopefully, I'll get those going next week. And hopefully get those once a week. If you watch this, let me know what clan you want me to start with. Because I will cover... Probably, I'll try and cover all of the 13 clans. The 13 base clans. And then kind of start going into the bloodlines. If there's enough interest. Maybe talk about some other aspects of the world. But let me know which of the... Let's say which of the 7 Camarilla clans you want me to talk about first. I think I can guess. Actually, there's a couple of possibilities that people might ask for out of spite. And there's a possibility that people might ask for because they like me. And this is the internet, so I'm assuming the spite one's going to win. So, well, we'll see, won't we? But, yeah. Let me know in the comments which of the Camarilla clans you want me to start talking about first. And we'll see how that goes next week. I hope you enjoyed this. It's a bit more rambling and non-specific than my first 3 videos on this. But as I said, it was kind of tying up loose ends. And part of it was just talking about standard D&D stuff. Or dice stuff, tabletop role-playing game stuff. Yeah. 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 I think we're done. Yeah. I feel like there's something else. Yeah. Ideally, I think, we'll say this. Ideally, when I start the clan stuff, if I get a format for that that works, if I can make that work. Ideally, what I'll do is I'll tell a story every now and again, separately, and do these specific discussions, like, I don't know, once a week, until I'm done with them. Yeah, so, like, so this will become less of a weekly series, but the clan discussions will become a weekly thing. And also, I will warn you, and I think I'll have to warn at the beginning of all those videos, and maybe have in the title, that I am going to be talking about it from the point of view of Vampire the Masquerade V20. Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Revised, rather than from the point of view of V5, because I don't like V5. I don't know. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is set in the V5 version of Vampire the Masquerade. Maybe that'll convert me, but I doubt it, because I do not like the V5 system now that I've read it. But yeah. Look forward to clan stuff. Let me know what clan you want me to cover. I might talk about Shadowrun next week as well. Maybe, if people are interested. Yeah. I got a couple of stories from Shadowrun. Got a couple of stories from D&D. I think I'll go with Shadowrun. Just completely swerve. Actually, yeah, that'll be a good test. See if anyone actually gives a shit about me talking about tabletop games that aren't Vampire by suddenly just out of nowhere, Shadowrun forth! See how that goes. Right, well, I'm done now.